ever get that feeling? You're like zipping through an English article, no problem. Every little detail makes sense. Maybe you like laugh at a clever phrase or something.
Yeah.
But then, bam, someone just asks, how was your weekend? And suddenly, it's like your brain is stuck in the slow lane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to say, oh, it was awesome, I went hiking. But what comes out is, well, something else.
Totally.
Maybe all jumbled up. Like you accidentally hit the grammar rewind button.
Yeah.
That feeling, you know, understanding everything, but actually speaking fluently. Tons of you have told us that's the big struggle.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's a super common thing for people learning any language, really. Just because you can get the gist of things doesn't mean the words flow out smoothly when you're trying to talk. It's like different parts of your brain are doing totally different jobs.
So that's exactly what we're gonna like break down today.
Yeah.
Think of this as like your strategy session for getting those words moving. We've got this great conversation between Emma and Liam, and they're talking about all this stuff. And our mission here is to figure out like why speaking English fluently can feel so darn hard.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we want to give you some actual stuff you can do starting today to actually make progress.
Right on.
Like, think of it as a cheat sheet for learning how to speak better, faster.
I like that. And we're going to do more than just like recap what they said. We want to dig into the core differences between just understanding a language and actually speaking it. We'll talk about the mental tracks people fall into.
Yeah.
And most importantly, the best ways to get comfortable and actually start speaking with more confidence, you know, so you can really get fluent.
So if you're tired of feeling fluent when you read, but totally tongue-tied when you try to talk, stick around. We're about to figure out how to move past that and start speaking more easily and confidently, you know. So first things first. What makes speaking so much harder than like reading a book or listening to a podcast?
Okay, so here's the interesting part. It's like going from just watching to actually doing. Emma uses this great analogy, watching a game versus playing it.
Correct.
When you're reading or listening, your brain is mostly just taking stuff in. It's like decoding the information that's coming at you. It's in receiving mode.
Yeah, okay, so like you're the audience just watching the show.
Exactly. But when you speak, it's completely different. Now you're the one on stage. You have to like pull up the right words, build sentences correctly all in the moment, and then like actually make those sounds with your mouth. It's way more demanding. It's like a whole bunch of mental processes happening all at once.
It's like knowing all the ingredients for a recipe versus actually cooking the meal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, chopping, sauteing, making sure everything is seasoned right while people are waiting to eat.
That is a perfect way to put it. And like Emma says, speaking isn't just one skill. It's a bunch of them all working together at the same time. You've got grammar, you've got the words themselves, pronunciation, and then this thing called fluency, which is basically how smoothly all those words come out. And if even one of those things is off, it can mess up the whole thing.
And then Liam, he brings up something that I think a lot of people worry about, like being scared to make grammar mistakes. It's like having this little voice in your head constantly judging every sentence you try to build.
Totally. And that fear of messing up the grammar can really stop people from speaking at all. But it's so important to remember that grammar is only one piece of the puzzle. And if you focus too much on being perfect, it can actually make it harder to communicate, which is kind of the whole point, right? And speaking of things that can hold us back,
let's talk about those common mistakes we make. What were some of the big ones that Emma and Liam talked about?
Well, one of the biggest things Emma pointed out is this idea that people try to be perfect before they even start practicing. She said a lot of learners are so worried about making mistakes that they don't speak at all. And Liam, he was like, yeah, that's totally me. What they're saying is, if you wait until you're perfect to speak, you'll be waiting forever. Mistakes are just part of learning. They're how you get better.
It's like feeling like you need to have this perfect speech ready in your head before you even open your mouth. But that just makes it harder to actually learn how to speak naturally, doesn't it?
It sure does. It's like you're locking yourself up, you know. And another big mistake they talked about is not practicing enough. Like Liam, he said he was mostly focused on studying all the rules and memorizing tons of words.
Which seems smart, right? Like build a strong base. But Emma made a really good point. She said, speaking requires actual practice. It's like reading a book about how to ride a bike, but never actually getting on one. You need to actually do it to learn.
Exactly. You have to use those muscles, get a feel for the rhythm, and just get used to the back and forth of a real conversation. And then Emma brought up this other thing, which is not listening to yourself when you speak. If you don't do that, you might not even realize you're making the same mistakes over and over again. It's all about paying attention to how you sound.
Like a musician playing an instrument, but never actually listening to the music they're making, right? They're so focused on playing the notes that they miss how it all comes together. Okay, so we know why speaking can feel tough, and we know some common traps to avoid. But now for the good stuff. How do we actually get better? Emma shared some really useful tips.
Yeah, she did. The most important one is to practice every single day. She says even just doing a little bit, like 10 minutes a day, can make a huge difference over time. It's like doing a mini workout for your speaking skills.
10 minutes, that's way easier than trying to find a whole hour, you know. And she gives some really simple examples, like describing what you're doing during the day or just talking about something you're interested in. You can even talk to yourself.
Right. The key is to make it a habit, to get your brain and your mouth used to forming English words and sentences. And the next tip is to try thinking in English.
Now this can feel kind of weird. It's like you're trying to reprogram your brain. Where do you even begin?
Emma says to start with small, everyday thoughts, like think about what you're going to eat or the steps you need to take to do a chore. The goal is to stop translating everything in your head. Every time you think directly in English, you're building a new connection in your brain, and it'll make speaking feel more natural over time.
Oh, I see. So instead of thinking, I need to buy milk in your native language and then translating it, you just think, I need to buy milk right away. Cut out that extra step. That makes sense. What else?
This one's really important. Emma says, especially when you're just starting out, focus on being fluent, not perfect. It's more important to communicate your ideas than to get every little grammar detail right.
Yeah, that's got to be a relief for someone like Liam, who was so worried about grammar. It's like giving yourself permission to make mistakes, which actually helps you get better at speaking.
Exactly. Mistakes are totally normal. Everyone makes them. Even native speakers mess up sometimes. The more you speak, the more you'll notice your own mistakes, and you'll naturally start correcting them. And that's how you improve. Oh, and another good tip. Emma says to start with simple sentences.
So instead of trying to say some super complicated sentence with like a million clauses and stuff, just focus on getting the main point across. Like her example, I went to the store. That's fine. You don't need to jump right into, I went to the store yesterday after work because I needed to buy milk and bread. Start small, build up from there.
I like that, yeah. Build a solid foundation first. Oh, and here's another tip. She says to learn and use common phrases. You know those sayings that native speakers use all the time without even thinking about it?
Like instead of saying, I am uncertain, which sounds kind of formal, you just say, I'm not sure. It's just more natural.
Exactly. Using these phrases makes you sound more like a native speaker. And it also helps you speak faster and more smoothly. Emma even said, once you get comfortable, you can start learning idioms and even some slang. That's when you really start sounding natural.
Now this next tip, I know some people might not like it, but I've heard it helps. Record yourself speaking.
I know it can feel awkward. It's like hearing your voice on a voicemail. But Emma says it's super helpful because it lets you hear how you really sound. You can notice things about your pronunciation, your speed, how you're saying things, and you can also see how much you improve over time.
It's like having a progress report, but for speaking. You can actually hear yourself getting better. Okay, so we have all these great techniques for improving our skills. But what about being nervous? Like, what if you're scared to actually open your mouth and speak because you're worried about messing up in front of people? Emma had some good advice about that too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Dealing with that nervousness is just as important as the actual skills. She said to start practicing in situations where you feel comfortable, like talk to close friends, family members, or maybe a tutor you really like, people you feel good around.
Yeah, like dipping your toes in the water before jumping into the deep end of the pool, right? Build up your confidence little by little.
Right. And she said something else that's really important. Remember how we talked about mistakes being normal? Everyone makes them. Even people who speak English as their first language, they say they mix up words, it happens. So don't be too hard on yourself.
Be kind to yourself and know that it's all part of the process. This is good advice for anything, not just language learning. And to wrap things up, Emma said something that was really key. She said the most important thing is to communicate, not to speak perfectly.
That's it. Focus on getting your message across clearly. The fluency and the perfect grammar, that will come with time and practice. Okay, so what about when you've been practicing for a while, you're feeling more confident, what's next? Emma also gave some tips for taking your English to the next level.
Yeah, what are those advanced moves?
Well, one thing is to keep learning new words. Emma says the more words you know, the more clearly and effectively you can express yourself. She said, make a point of learning new words every day and then actually try using them in conversation. And something that can really help is learning different words that mean the same thing or the opposite, synonyms and antonyms. It makes your speech sound more interesting.
Like instead of using the same basic words all the time, you have a whole set of tools to choose from.
Yeah. She also said to practice talking about different topics, like current events, your hobbies, your opinions on things. It helps you get comfortable speaking in different situations.
It makes you think in English and come up with the right words on the spot.
Right. And her last suggestion was to join a speaking club or find a language partner. That way you can practice with other people and get feedback. There are lots of groups online and in person,
Yeah, that sounds fun. You get to practice and make new friends at the same time. Okay, so we've talked a lot about getting better at speaking, but what about staying motivated? Emma had some tips for that too, didn't she?
She did. She said it's important to set specific goals. So instead of just saying, I want to speak more English, try something like, I'm going to have a 5-minute English conversation every day. Or I'm going to learn 3 new words about my hobby this week and use them when I talk to people. And then track your progress, Seeing yourself get closer to your goal helps you stay motivated.
And don't forget to celebrate your wins, even the small ones. It feels good and makes you want to keep going.
Exactly. Emma said to celebrate every time you express yourself well in English or understand something new. Those little wins add up.
It's like giving yourself a little pat on the back to keep going.
And her last tip was to find a language partner, someone who's also learning English. You can help each other stay motivated and practice together. There are tons of apps and websites for finding language partners too.
So it sounds like Emma gave Liam and all of us a really useful plan for getting better at speaking English.
She did. And the main takeaway is that if you put in the effort consistently and you're positive about it, you can definitely do it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Emma and Liam's conversation, we've learned about the difference between just understanding a language and actually speaking it. We've talked about the mistakes to avoid, like trying to be perfect right away and not practicing enough. And we've learned some really useful strategies, from everyday practice and thinking in English to focusing on fluency and learning from native speakers. Oh, and we talked about how to deal with being nervous and ways to keep getting better, all while staying motivated.
It's a whole package, you know? Becoming a fluent speaker isn't just about the rules, it's about confidence and learning the right way.
Exactly. So now it's your turn. We've given you all this great advice straight from Emma and Liam. Now think about this. What's one small step you can take today to start practicing? It could be anything. Maybe talk to yourself in English for 5 minutes, or watch a short video and try to repeat some phrases. It might not seem like much, but that one small step could be the start of something big. You can get more fluent and feel more confident speaking English. Take what you've learned and start putting it into practice. That's how you really make progress.